Welcome to AEW 360 Live at Advertising Week New York. I'm BJ Smith. I'm joined by Josh Wetzel, Senior Director of Sales and Marketing at eBay. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm honored to be here.
We're glad to have you here. So as we were sort of talking offline, you were mentioning that you're part of the North American Mobile Marketing Association board. What are some of the things you've learned there?
It's been a truly great learning experience. I think when you look at marketing in general, we all come from different places in the ecosystem and have different roles, so we understand kind of different parts of it. And one of the things that's been interesting to me is this whole notion of multi-touch attribution, right? Organizations have sacred cows. Whether you came from TV, you came from print, you're really into performance marketing, whatever it may be, you come with a bias, whether you're aware of it or not.
Right.
And we're struggling, I think, as an industry, really, to break down those sacred cows. Because whether your organization is really heavy on TV or really heavy on digital, there's a proclivity for that. And ultimately, I think some of the work we're doing in the MMA has been truly informative and educational for me personally, but I think will be tremendous in the industry in terms of starting to recognize where those sacred cows live, and it'll be different by different organization based on what your product or service is.
You know, it's interesting talking about the sacred cows, and I think that's something that we learned very early on. I actually teach in a graphic design program in a college, and everything is so heavily print. And I'm the one who's pushing more for the more digital programs to teach them about the web design, teach them these other platforms and mobile and all that. And I'm not one who's going to say that print is dead. I don't believe that at all. But it's interesting how, from the very beginning, we're taught that these are your core areas, and you might get a little taste of this too.
Yeah, I think, if you go like a level deeper, the reality is that there is so many different places the customer travels, right? So if you think about it from a marketing lens, you've got to have and be on top of what are those touch points and be holistic about it. And we've gotten as an industry much more siloed into above the line, below the line, performance, brand, and that's just not how consumer thinks. Like, that's not consumer centric. Yeah. And I think that's the stuff that's really exciting to me, is that technology is now enabling this view through. So if I'm a marketer, I can now see, or I'm getting closer to a view of, I did a TV commercial here, I did video here, paid social, whatever it may be. How are those things contributing to that experience that we couldn't even have done 5 years ago? And it's ultimately having transformative impact on the industry.
Right. Well, and speaking of 5 years ago, so what are some of the challenges that we're facing with innovation?
Well, innovation is an interesting one, because I think with all this data and these advancements, if you will, we get stuck more often in those optimization layers, because you find yourself looking at, okay, I know that if I do this tweak, I can get a 3 or 4 or 5% gain. That's a known. To be innovative is really to take a step back and say, there's something I can do. It's going to take longer. It's an investment. There's no guarantee it's going to be successful. And I think, as I touched on with multi-touch attribution, that's going to be a game changer for marketing organizations, because now they'll have a better view through on what are the touch points that are adding value for my product or service or by business line. But that takes a multi-year commitment, because you got to get your data combined and cleansed, and then you got to layer on the vendor relationships and proprietary technology to get that view, and it's hard. So to me, innovation is really tied to, are you willing to make that investment in time and resources to get to that end result? And by the way, it may not work out, but you have to be okay with that.
Where do you think some of the true innovators are going to be coming from? Are they going to be coming from the small companies that don't have a lot to lose and can just go out there, or are we talking about some of the bigger companies that have that extra investment that they can put into a risk that may not pay off?
Well, that's the age-old quandary, right? I think the reason why you see so many innovations coming from the small companies is exactly what you said. They have nothing to lose, so they can just throw it out there. But I think if you look at large companies that continually innovate, established organizations, whether it's an Apple when they did the iPod, right, or the iPhone, or it's Amazon with some of the areas they've gone into. Those are big risks that took major investments to them get to. But I think it's always going to be led by large or small organizations doing innovative things that then get acquired by big organizations and get integrated properly, right? So you can do acquisitions poorly. But I think ultimately the innovation does come from, these big advancements do come from small organizations who can be more nimble and quick in their optimization.
You talked a little bit about 5 years ago. What do you think the industry is going to look like 5 years from now?
My hope is that through an understanding around multi-touch attribution and breaking down some of these silos, and ultimately sacred cows, as we talked about, people will have a much better view on where the value is being created for their product or service,
right.
And there'll be more synergy between marketing and other functions within organizations, right? That's another thing we talked about earlier is that, you know, a lot of these companies, especially digital native, if I look at eBay as an example, product runs and really owns the consumer experience. Marketing has a tremendous influence on that, the product owns it. We need to get to a place where there's a lot more alignment and synergy, a holistic view of it, and I think the MAT research and multi-touch attribution will have a huge impact on that.
Great. Josh Wetzel from eBay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
We'll be back with more AW360 Live from Advertising Week New York.